Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Amy McCoy. I'm the marketing director over at Ongoing Operations, and I just want to thank you for joining our Lattes and Learning webinar this morning on how to create and maintain an information security governance plan. So today, if we want to scroll through, Shane, our presenters are going to be Ben Gallo, who's our VP of Sales and our newest addition to the Ongoing Operations team. And if you're a regular to this series, you've heard from Shane before. Always another wonderful presentation from Shane Butcher, who's our Senior Solutions and Security Architect, as well as our virtual CISO. So with that being said, I'll just quickly go through the format today. Our format's going to be about an approximately 20-minute presentation followed by open Q&A. So if you have questions as we're going through in sections that Shane and Ben are discussing, please go ahead and type them into the chat, and I'll go ahead and serve as a sort of a moderator and interject those in to our team to answer. And also feel free to wait till the end if you'd prefer. We'll have time for Q&A as well. If you're interested in seeing a copy of these slides as we present, you can go ahead and take a look in the handout section here, and there's a PDF file of these slides for your reference. So with that, please sit back, enjoy a cup of coffee, and we hope you enjoy this installment of Lattes and Learnings with Ongoing Operations.
Thank you, Amy, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this morning. So first, we want to talk about what is information security governance and why do we need it? And kind of get through the boring definition part, but information security governance, encompasses the policy, standards, procedures that we use to dictate our information security practices in our environments and to help us manage risk. And we need it because the governance is going to specify that accountability and oversight that we use to ensure that the policies and procedures are being followed every day, week, month, year, and that we are appropriately managing those risks to secure our environments. And so, knowing that the information security governance is wrapped up in the policies, why do we want or need a governance plan? And the governance plan is just going to help us organize those activities that are contained in the policies and procedures that we're supposed to be doing into one cohesive unit so that we're able to validate that those items are being actioned consistently. So we need to start with creating the plan. And how do we do that? The first place that we want to go is to the policies, right? We need to look at what they say, what do we say that we're going to do, right? We know with auditors, with examiners, if we say we're going to do it, we need to be doing it, right? Or we get dinged very hard. We also want to look at how do we verify that we're going to do it? Does that have to go to someone to, an outside, someone outside the actual task to verify it? Are we generating reports? How are we verifying that we're doing those actions to verify that, to verify that we're compliant with our policies, and what frequency does that say that we should do it? So, when we help folks build policies, we always assign owners, we assign action items, and then we assign the folks that are required to either review or do those action items, and then specify it. So whether it's an annual board review of policies or a monthly review of your vulnerability scans, and who's going to do that, and who generates the reports, we always make sure that those are wrapped up in the policies. The next place we want to look is, at federal and state regulations and make sure that our policies and procedures encompass what, FFIEC, NCUA, state regulators say that we need to be doing in order to comply with those regulations, right? And ensure that our governance plan properly validates those items. And then the next place we want to look at is any contractual requirements. A key one that stands out that does apply to credit unions is PCI. What are the things that we need to be doing to ensure that we're compliant with our PCI agreement so that we can issue and process cards? Ben, anything to add on those ones?
Yeah, absolutely. And the big piece that we've done before with, especially when we're bringing in other regulatory requirements like PCI, is crosswalking a lot of those same controls across the different requirements, so that you've got a better idea in terms of where is there overlap and where they're creating additional gaps when you do bring in additional requirements like PCI.
Thank you. So, once we've reviewed, what we say we're doing and what we're supposed to be doing, we then need to just define the activities in one place. And again, as if our policies are properly written, right, they should all be laid out for us. And so, we want to, again, and if they're not, right, we want to go ahead and define those activities that we need to be doing to validate that these actions are taking place. So let's take, patch management. How are we ensuring that our devices are fully up to date at the end of our patching cycle? Who is reviewing that and who is signing off on that, right? So we want to define those, activities. We want to ensure that we assign, the appropriate people to these checks, right? We want to make sure that we have checks and balances. So the folks that are doing the items, right, they should obviously be checking their work, but we want to have someone that's not vested in that action actually validating that it was done. We want to make sure that we've got transparency into these items, because again, our whole purpose of this is managing risk in our environments, and we want to know if the risk exists, and again, no self-policing. So once we've figured out what we need to do, we've defined the activities and assigned those roles and responsibilities, we want to make sure that we update our policies, so that if we've missed anything, that we've decided that there are other things that we need to do, we want to make sure that's reflected in our policies, or procedures, depending on the item, so that we, it flows from the policies down to what we're doing. And then we want to establish those governance procedures, right, that we're going to fill out our plan with. Although the policy sets the high level, action items, we now need to make sure that we've got clear steps on how we're going to ensure these items are taking place, and that we're going to execute these down to, all right, we'll pull reports from system A, that will be sent to person A, and then person B will sign off that that was, actually done and reviewed. And then lastly, we want to ensure that we create some sort of tracking mechanism. Most of you probably have some sort of ticketing system for IT. Highly recommend that you use that, but also just ensure that you have some sort of checklist that you can quickly refer to, as you build this plan. All right, did our tickets generate, this quarter or this month? I've worked with folks before where the tickets didn't fire, right? And we go back to that checklist, and then they ensure that the periodic tickets are done. So we want to make sure that we've got a way to track that we're doing these, because we want to be able to produce artifacts, A, to prove to our board that we're doing it, but B, also to prove to the regulators and auditors that we are actioning all of these things that we say we're going to do. Ben, any other points on this one?
No, I think you did a nice job there, Shane.
Cool. All right. So as we look through areas that we want to consider in concluding in our governance plan, again, we want, this kind of comes from, reaching across our policies and the areas that we need to manage with our risk and our security, right? So change management. Are we conducting change management, and do we have the appropriate reviews? Do we have the appropriate things in scope, and are we following it? Have we seen changes happen that weren't approved? Ben, did you have something on change?
No, I think overall, where we've seen credit unions get into trouble, especially as we go into each one of these areas, is without the governance program in place, we see them implementing a lot of these different tools and technologies because either they heard it was a good thing to do or the regulators had required it. But they're all typically implemented in very different fashions and not following sort of that overall policy or governance program. And so I think that's a big part of, in my experience, what I've seen, why it's so important to start with the governance planning first, and then make sure as you implement each one of these tool sets that it's aligning with the others. Otherwise, not only can you get a little bit of a discombobulated implementation of different tools, but also when it does come time to whether you're going through an examination, we've also run into the case where we found credit unions that had contradictory settings and or policies in the different tools that were set up.
Yep, definitely. And and again, to highlight a couple of the items that we really want to pay attention to on some of these, incident management. Most of the time, our incident management policies and plans are going to have specific reporting requirements, right? That may go all the way up to the full board. We want to ensure that every week we're checking, did we have an incident? If so, making sure that we're following that process. Things like anti-malware, patching, vulnerability management. We want to make sure that all of those pieces are being monitored and that those tools are operating effectively, right? The whole goal is to keep managing our risk. SIM management, are things actually reporting? Are we getting alerts? Has something dropped offline? If it gets silent, right, we want to check why we're not getting any alerts. Just those types of tools. If we're not getting alerted, we might think things are going well, but in reality, we could have problems. But again, so looking across these, asset and software inventory management, do we know what's on our network, right? Making sure that no new things have popped up that our scanning tools are reporting that we haven't considered. Some additional areas to consider, right? Backups, we all are probably backing up items, but are we making sure that they work? We don't want to find out in the middle of an event that we're, that our backup tool has changed and it can't read our older backups. So, having items like quarterly restores and the test restores, those types of things we want to really consider in our policy. One that is largely overlooked is access and permission reviews. Usually the bane of most IT departments' existences, right? When you have to go through and do a full permission audit, but very, very important for ensuring, that we haven't had permission creep on folks that have changed roles, that we haven't, even monthly, making sure your domain administrators group has not creeped, or we haven't added folks in that we don't know, so that we're, again, controlling access to our systems, but one that's really, really important that isn't always done. Our DRBCP and policy management, again, are we reviewing them within the periods that we say we're going to? Are we doing our vendor due diligence annually? Has that vendor that is one of our critical vendors now, had a major breach or multiple breaches, in the last year since we've done it, and maybe we should start considering another vendor because they're not actually practicing their security policies. So all of these, pieces, and including board reporting and these annual type things, we need to make sure that we have a tracking mechanism to ensure that they're happening on the time period that we're doing them. Ben?
Yeah, and I'd say the one other piece to add in here are looking at HR policies that have to do with onboarding and offboarding employees, and making sure that you have an alignment in your HR policies, in your handbooks, with your overall security policies. We've run into the case several times where there's an offboarding process that's run by HR that isn't meeting any of, say, the access or permission removals or some of the other policies across the board, and it's done a little bit. The technical folks of the organization kind of find out through the grapevine in terms of who's leaving or what the case might be, and then rushing to try to fill that. And of course, as people rush, making mistakes in terms of removing permissions. And the same thing with onboarding, understanding what is the onboarding policy and how does it link into each one of these areas with that individual. I think, again, where we see a lot of mistakes being made is access and permissions, where in most cases, when an individual is onboarded, they say, well, just give them, the easiest thing to do is just copy all of the access and permissions of this other individual, right? And what people don't know is that maybe that other individual had been granted, slowly granted higher level access throughout their career at the credit union, and has a whole bunch of access to applications and parts of the network that maybe a new individual shouldn't have access to. So again, going back to making sure that we've got the overall governance policy, and then bringing in all aspects of the credit union so that you do have alignment.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. So now we're going to move on to maintaining the plan. And the top item, accountability is key, right? we got to have an owner, and depends on your organization and the size of your organization who that's going to be. If you have a CISO, that's kind of a key person that could own it. Risk management, senior IT management, depending on the size, or in a lot of organizations, we see internal audit owning this. But really someone to make sure that this is happening, that we're following it, and that there is a final checkoff that these items are being validated, right? And preferably having a board policy type assignment, or a senior management assignment, so that that this is being carried out and it has the weight of the organization, right? Create requests in your ticketing system, like I mentioned before. That is one of the easiest way to keep track of that. If your system allows you to do periodic tickets, that it's going to come up at the appropriate time. You want to create artifacts for all of these. Again, the ticketing system helps that. Create artifacts of reports that you've generated to validate these, and get folks to sign off to it and attach those to your tickets. That way, when you're asked to produce and prove that you've done this, you can go do your query, export the artifacts, print out your ticket, and your examiners, auditors, board, management can see that all of this was done and the actions that you took during these governance items. And again, take action and sign off. If you find an anomaly, right, document that, make sure that there's a clear follow-up plan, and that someone has signed off on owning that action. And so next, we like to go into and with what can you do right now to take action at your credit union, right? And the first thing is get it on paper. If you don't have a plan and you haven't really thought about how am I going to organize my governance activities, the best way to do that is go through your policies and look at those action items, the things that you say you're going to do. What should you be doing? What are you actually doing right now? Because you may have a lot of processes, procedures that you're doing that actually fulfill those governance items, and it may just not have occurred to put, that that's part of the governance plan. So let's record those, right? And then reconcile the two. Update your policies if you need to, if you're not doing things that you should be, or you're doing things that aren't actually recorded in your policies. Update those, and then update your procedures to reflect either what you're really doing or what you need to do. The next big thing that you can do is implement a tracking method, like we talked. As you get that plan down on paper, whether it's a chart in a spreadsheet or a nice document, then implement the tracking method. Again, like I've said a couple times already, ticketing system is one of the best ways to do that, because it's a hard document in a database system that can prove what you've done. But whatever works for you in your environment, as long as you have clear tracking and sign off on that. And then lastly, review and revise, right? This is not a one and done. Just like we have to review our policies annually and all of these other things at least annually, we want to make sure that the governance plan is keeping up with the current systems that we have, any changes that we or additions that we've done, and the current regulation, regulatory environment and contractual requirements. So don't as you're including in your governance plan, make sure your governance plan includes a review of that. Ben, any other things to add on what we can do now?
Yeah, absolutely. So two of the I guess blockers that I've seen most organizations run into when they're starting this process is it's just overwhelming, and B, it gets created and then sits on the shelf and doesn't really get reviewed on a regular basis. And really to get over the first one, a lot of times it's just getting started is the tough part. For those of you that are students of policy and governance plans, there's some great documentation out there. NIST CSF, Cybersecurity Controls Framework, is a great place to start. That gives you some good overall rules and governance policies to start with. It doesn't get into the nitty gritty. It leaves that up to you to sort of define how you're meeting some of those policies. So there are some great downloads and tools available on the internet around this CSF. The other way is to bring in a service provider to help you get started and get those governance and policies in place. The second, I guess, fail that we see with credit unions is, again, it doesn't stay updated. It doesn't get involved into the overall practice. And that really is just making the review of what does the effect of a change at the organization have with how is that affected by your policies, or how does that affect your policies? And so some great ways that I've seen other credit unions solve that is they build that into the actual processes. So when someone is building, say, a new product to offer to their members, when there is a business plan that's going on to say, hey, we're going to offer this new functionality, or we're going to integrate with Visa in order to allow some advanced credit card pause and unpause functionality and so on, that a step in your process is to review governance, really. And it's just asking a couple of simple questions. Looking at is there anything in our current governance policies and procedures that prohibits us from being able to provide or do anything that we want to do with this new service, this new offering to our members? And then the other question is there something that we're going to be doing that we should be adding to that, right? And then that becomes sort of a living part of how you are releasing new services, both to your organization and to your members.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
So now we are at the Q&A section. Amy?
Yeah, so please, guys, go ahead if you have any questions for the team on this topic, anything that was touched on that you want to know more about or that we didn't hit and you're interested in, please go ahead and type in those questions. And again, I will also say if anything comes to you after this presentation that you're interested in learning more about, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at info@ongoingoperations.com. And of course, we can get your question sent over to Shane. We had one that came in earlier that we can start with that said, Shane, you talked about access and permission reviews. How often do you recommend an audit of this as a best practice?
So at a minimum or annually, right, for a full permission review, I highly recommend that you're looking at your domain administrators, any privileged account, elevated account monthly. Those guys have the key to the castle. And then I also recommend it usually at least monthly or quarterly to reconcile, as Ben was saying, right, with our offboarding process. Have all the folks that have left been actually disabled or removed from the system. So I highly recommend you at least confirm an offboarding monthly to quarterly, and then a full permission review annually.
Awesome.
Yeah, one add to that is the hardest part about doing that access and permissions review is the first time you do it. And
Yep.
I've seen some great practices in credit unions after that first time, because that really is a lot of work going through all the systems and looking for who has access, what's the level of access, and so on. Once that's done, the best credit union processes I've seen have been the ability to distribute that review. So not assigning one person to go through and say this is okay, but then sending the appropriate, and they have it broken out into a spreadsheet, so it's not very technical. And they send a portion of that spreadsheet to each manager, and then the manager reviews, whether it's on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. Hey, these are all the permissions and level of permissions that all of your direct reports have. Do you have any, add changes or deletes? And that way, it's a fairly quick. They highlight the fields that need to be changed, and then that comes back in, creates a ticket. And then those changes are taken. And that has been a great way to maintain that. Because again, the hardest part about a lot of these is that maintenance and building that maintenance of your cybersecurity policies, procedures, and governance into the way that you do business on a daily basis.
Awesome. We have another one here of who do you recommend to ultimately own the overall IT governance process if you're at a smaller credit union with limited IT staff?
Yep. So again, probably if you've got internal audit, that's probably a prime or whoever's in whoever's owning risk management or IT audit is probably a good one. They may not be the ones to actually do all these tasks, but to ensure that they're being handled. That's kind of for some smaller credit and even larger credit unions. We on the CISO team, that's part of what we assist with, right, in helping do those validations across a number of those things. But you know, it's without understanding the exact organization, owning that plan is probably going to be up in your risk, someone that's managing your risk, and then involving, kind of team leads or, system leads in there if you have limited IT folks to perform some of these actions.
Yeah, and the only add I would do there, and I know this probably goes without saying with this crowd, making sure that you have a different reporting structure to the CEO, and or I've seen in many cases where the individuals that own risk and or governance have a dotted line to the board to make sure that there is that line of separation all the way up through the CEO and sometimes to the board between the individuals that are executing the policies and the individuals that are checking the governance. And it doesn't have to be a technical individual. They literally can have a checklist, have a meeting, and say, okay, did you do these things, so on and so forth. In my previous company where I was the CEO, I had one CTO that owned everything technical in the organization, and so I ended up pulling another individual out of the finance team that may not understood the technical side, but they really were a stickler for detail. And so what she was very good at was that she was very good at going through and checking the boxes. Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And so on. And she also was not afraid to point out where he did not do something, which I think she kind of enjoyed a little bit. So again, making sure that even a small company, and that was a company of 15 people that I ran, we were able to create some level of separation of duties. And then I would have her present her results directly to my board so that as we were being audited as an organization to ensure that, yes, we do have that governance plan in place and there wasn't an opportunity for even an opportunity for the CTO and or the CEO to hide the results. Not that would ever happen.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Do we have any other questions from the group before we go to wrap up? Well, again, I'll just reiterate if I don't see any more come in here that if anything comes up, please go ahead and feel free to reach out to us at info@ongoingoperations.com. We'll make sure that the question gets over to the right group if it's Shane on this presentation and such. And I want to thank you again for joining us for this this installment of Lattes and Learnings. Again, in the handout section, there's a PDF version of the slides that you can download if you want to have that for reference from what we talked about today. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, which should be and usually we do these every 2 weeks, Wednesdays, 11 a.m. Eastern. And any closing thoughts from Shane and Ben?
No, just want to thank everybody for joining, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Take it easy.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, bye.